3 witches, what appears to be a castle, and a black cat.
If we weren't missing 2 officers and a third one dead, I'd say someone was playing an elaborate trick or treat on us.
Trick or treat, Captain?
Yes, Mr. Spock. You'd be a natural.
Bridge to all decks. Welcome aboard Season 2 of Enterprise Incidents with Scott and Steve. I'm Scott Nance.
And I'm Steve Morris. And I wish that we were jumping into Season 2 on an episode I could be 100% excited about. But instead, it's Catspaw.
But you know what? Catspaw is still fun. This is an episode I always liked. I thought it was fun. Not an episode that I watch a whole lot. So rewatching Catspaw for our Season 2 premiere of Enterprise Incidents has been so rewarding for so many reasons. The biggest of which, Steve Morris, I had a massive epiphany.
Oh, I'm excited.
I had a revelation during my rewatch of Catspaw that when we get to this point in our deep dive, it is going to change the foundation of a debate that has been going on since 1982, and it is going to shake the foundation of the Star Trek world. When I make this revelation, it is going to answer a question that everyone has had since 82.
I have a guess about what it might be.
What?
Do you want me to say it now?
Go for it.
Chekhov.
Okay.
And Wrath of Khan.
Okay, yes, it is. That's what this answers, but you don't know why yet.
Okay. Well, as soon as you said 1982,
yeah, it has to be Chekhov
that.
in the Enterprise and Spacey. But when I get to this point, it's going to blow your mind, as are other revelations that I had about Catspaw. So Catspaw was the very first episode that they shot for Season 2. It was filmed between May 2nd and May 11th, 1967. It was the 31st episode of Star Trek to film. It was a production schedule of 7.5 days. So that means it went a day and a half over schedule. Now, a few firsts about Catspaw is that Catspaw is it's the first, but it is the only episode of Star Trek that was filmed and produced as a holiday special. In other words, from the moment this episode got the green light, it was intended to be the Halloween episode of Star Trek for obvious reasons. And it aired on October 27th, 1967. It was the 36th episode to air, written by Robert Bloch, who wrote the first season episode, What Are Little Girls Made Of?, directed by the great Joseph Pevney. So now we talk so much about budget in Season 1. So in Season 2, when Season 2 kicked off, the budget per episode was still $185,000 per episode. Now, when we were doing our Season 1 wrap, I mentioned that collectively the series for the entire season was in the red for about $150,000. And as you so correctly pointed out, when you break it down episode by episode, it actually wasn't that bad. But because of all the lessons they learned, Steve, filming Season 1, so when they got to Season 2, and they're using now these directors that they've used before, and they're using that they have someone like Gene Kuhn, who's the showrunner. You would think that they figured it out, right? That they figured it out like, okay, we know where we went wrong in the first season and why things went over budget so much, or as often as it did. But we got it down. We figured it out. We're like a well-oiled machine. So we're going to bring this baby, this first episode that we're producing for Season 2, we're going to bring this right on budget. Right?
Wrong.
Catspaw cost $217,285, which brings it $32,285 over budget. Now, when you watch this episode, you see where the money went.
No, there's a lot of stuff. Absolutely.
There's a lot of stuff. The production design, the visual effects from the Westheimer Company. The visual effects alone for this episode cost $14,150. And for the first time in a long while, we had the entire episode had a brand new music score. The previous one that had a new score to it was Sitting on the Edge of Forever, but that was a partial score.
Right.
This is a full score, and I love the score for Catspaw. It was composed by Gerald Fried. It was his second score after Shore Leave, which is a great score.
Yeah, that's a great one.
And that score was recorded on June 21st, 1967. But one thing I will say that I absolutely loved during my rewatch, and this is something I love about all of the second season, especially the first part of it, Jerry Finnerman.
Yep.
His work on this episode, and when you look at the next few episodes in production order, like the next one after this is Metamorphosis, the look of the show has never looked better than it did during the beginning of the second season. Also, everybody looks great. They're tan, rested, and ready after a summer. Shatner himself had never looked better than he did at the beginning of the second season. And there's a theme. There are themes to this episode as we get into our deep dive that are something new about it, but something that definitely leans into something that we've seen many times before in Star Trek.
I want to mention something about budget. You said this idea that we're going to figure it out. Anyone who does a lot of film production can tell you never figure it out. You never figured it out. I was teaching a class, and teaching film school, I would sometimes be on the student filmmaker's set. And there was something where they had to do some lighting through the window of a garage into a thing. And I'm with the cinematography instructor, and they go, well, how do we do this? And the cinematography instructor and I look at each other and we go like, I've never had that particular problem before. Two people, him with a ton of experience, me with, some cinematography. And I was going, no, I don't know how to solve this problem. And I suddenly went, oh, that's always what film production is. It's always new. Now you got a giant cat, and you got, there's just different. Now we got a lot of fog, and now we have castle sets. And now it's like, you never know until you start shooting it what's going to cost. I don't quite understand. I don't understand why this is the first episode of the second season. I don't understand why you would say, let's spend a lot of money on this episode. I guess because it's Halloween. But spoiler alert, it was always like, okay, this episode, and watching it this time, this is one, it got a lot worse for me.
Well, maybe Steve, after this conversation, maybe it'll get a little better. Not a whole lot.
That would be a wonderful gift if you could give that to me.
Okay. Well, listen. Robert Bloch's original contract based on his pitch was dated March 6th, 1967. He wrote his outline March 9th. His second draft teleplay was dated April 14th. Dorothy Fontana comes in and does a rewrite, a final draft teleplay dated April 24th. Gene Roddenberry did a polish, a revised final draft, on April 27th. And Gene Kuhn did some page revisions dated May 4th, 5th, and 10th. So like I said, this is the only Star Trek episode to be produced as a holiday special type of episode. I mean, the only Star Trek episode to this very day. Wow. So that's across all of the shows. And because of the addition of a new cast member, this is the very first Star Trek episode to feature all 7 members of the main cast.
Wow.
Now, Robert Bloch based this on his own short story, Broomstick Ride, which was about an Earth ship that explores a planet with witches and warlocks. But that is how pre-production on this episode got started.
Wow. Well, I want to tell you some of the things that were going on in the world, but first I want to share something, the discussion that Scott and I had off mic, which is that when we first started doing this, the very first couple of episodes of Enterprise Incidents, when we talked about the history of the time, we actually were talking about what happened when the episode aired. And that's somewhere 2 or 3 episodes in, unbeknownst to us, we just kind of switched to what was going on when the episode was being filmed. And after a discussion, we would like to go back to what was going on when the episode aired. And the reason is we just kept thinking about that family that was driving home, kid coming home from school. What did they watch on the news before they switched on Star Trek? And so from now on, we're going to do, this is the week that led up to the airing of Catspaw, which happened on October 27th. So on October 20th, Roger Patterson and Roger Gimlin, they were in Bluff Creek, California, and they saw an animal unlike one they had ever seen before. and they caught a photograph of it, and that photograph was the first clearly documented proof of the existence of Bigfoot or
that
Sasquatch.
photo.
Yep.
That photo of him walking away and looking at the camera?
That's what it is. And at the time, they looked at it and go like, we can't disprove, we can't say what this is. And more recently with computers, they found the zipper, and it's a fake.
I figured it out. You know what that creature is?
What?
It's one of the creatures from the Galileo 7.
Absolutely. Just wandered off the Desilu lot.
Revelation!
On October 21st, there was huge anti-war protests outside the Pentagon and the Lincoln Memorial. More than 100,000 people came to these protests. Lyndon Johnson feared that this would result in a domestic crisis, that there would be riots across the country. And many newspapers said that these protesters were led by professional troublemakers and communist agitators. On the same day, 47 out of 190 men on board an Israeli destroyer were killed when the ship was hit by 3 Egyptian missiles, and there was massive wounded. 3 days later, Israel retaliates, and they basically take out the major oil refineries in Egypt that handle 80% of Egypt's oil. On October 26th, and this is a really important one in our history up to a few years ago, U.S. Navy pilot John McCain III was shot down in North Vietnam and taken prisoner. He ejected over Hanoi. He broke both arms and his right leg. He was a prisoner of war for more than 5 years, turning down a chance to be set free early before finally being released in 1973.
Wow, what a life. Amazing.
Yeah. Would you like to get into Catspaw?
Well, yes, because I cannot wait to share my revelation.
I'm so excited about it. Right away, the music that opens is different. The vibe is totally different.
Still no response, sir.
I'll keep it open.
They're on the planet Pyrus 7, which even in the remastered visual effects, it looks really sinister and ominous. It looks like a spooky planet.
It's true.
Scott and Sulu should have contacted us again a half an hour ago.
They may have nothing to report. Our sensors indicate no life forms except our landing party.
Both those men are well aware of landing party procedure.
And then suddenly we get a message.
Contact established, Captain.
Jackson to Enterprise.
Enterprise, Kirk here.
1 to beam up, Enterprise.
1? Jackson, where are Scott and Sulu?
I'm ready to beam up, sir.
Right now, we know something is going on. And we give the order to beam up one member. We ask McCoy to meet us in the transporter room. We get to the transporter room. They energize the transporters. And there is Jackson.
And he beams aboard. He's just standing there, staring off into space. And this is why you know immediately that Jimmy Jones, who played Jackson, is a stuntman.
Oh, my God.
What a fall.
Look.
I'm surprised he didn't fall through that set.
That hurt. Having done a lot of falls, that one really hurts.
Like you look at that fall. I mean, I'm surprised you didn't see a silhouette of his body at the bottom of the transporter platform there.
Oh, absolutely brutal. And again, McCoy runs up. They turn him over and says he's dead. No medical help. That doesn't do anything. No CPR.
Now, one thing about the earlier version that Robert Bloch wrote is that it wasn't Jackson who dies. It was Sulu.
Oh.
Sulu died, and the producers are like, Sulu's a major character.
Yeah,
sorry.
we're not killing him. And then we hear out of Jackson's unmoving mouth a creepy voice that says, Captain Kirk.
I know, that's cheesy.
Can you hear me? There is a curse on your ship. Leave this place or you will all die.
And then that music sting. That is a teaser. Now, I got to say, when you do watch Catspaw, there's only one way to watch it.
I just watched it.
When you watch it again, if you watch it again, Steve, the best way to watch it is in the dark.
Of course. You mean it's not like on my iPad while I'm trying to get my kid to sleep? Because that's how I watched part of it this
if you're
last
on a
time.
plane watching it, on your iPad, not the same effect.
We're back in Act 1, and we leave DeSalle in command. We get DeSalle back. We haven't seen him for a while. And our big 3, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, are going to beam down to the planet.
Now, while they're beaming down, the Enterprise is in orbit. They beam down, and you hear a captain's log. Steve, it is time for my revelation.
Okay, tell me.
Okay. The star date is 3018.2.
Okay.
Now, if you put the star dates in order chronologically, which, of course, you should do, So that means that even though Catspaw was the first episode filmed for the second season, the star date means that the events of Catspaw actually took place after the events of the menagerie.
What?
And before the events of Shore Leave, because of the star dates. The star date, 3018.2, falls between the menagerie and Shore Leave. And Chekhov is on the bridge of the Enterprise in Catspaw, which means that since this episode takes place before Shore Leave, it also takes place before Space Seed. So that means that Chekhov was indeed aboard the Enterprise during Space Seed, even though we did not see him. So it is absolutely conceivable that somewhere on the lower decks of the Enterprise, Khan did indeed run into Mr. Chekhov, and that is why he says in The Wrath of Khan, I never forget a face, Mr. Chekhov. He was there on the Enterprise, and there you go. That's it. People have been wondering, how could he have remembered Mr. Chekhov? He wasn't even in the first season, but if you look at the chronological order of star dates, Chekhov was there on the Enterprise, even though we didn't see him during Space Heat. He was on the Enterprise. That's the revelation.
Scott Mance.
Yes.
I believe that this is a discovery of Eureka level proportions.
It is. I had a Eureka moment.
I believe this is the apple falling down from the tree for Isaac Newton. I believe this is Einstein in the patent office discovering the theory of relativity. I feel like you have cracked the code.
I've cracked the code. This is it. Stardate 3018.2 is earlier than Space Seed. And by the way, here's the other thing. When we see Chekhov on the Enterprise at Catspaw, we don't see him in the Navigator station. He's at the science station.
Yeah.
So maybe he was just filling in for Spock, but in actuality, he had not yet been promoted to the Navigator position, where we will soon see him.
This begs a question, because I know there are people who have looked into this in detail. I never have, because that's not my particular variety of geek. How accurate are the star dates?
Well, look, truth be told, I don't think they put a whole lot of thought into them. I mean, the fact that they dated this star date, and it's in the second season, but it's actually airing after all those episodes.
But it's dated before.
It's dated before. That was just a fluke.
I mean, did they work out what the star dates meant when they were doing them?
They never actually consciously worked it out. But thanks to headcanon, and certainly, the way I look at it, I look at the first number of the star date, indicating the year that they're in space. So because the star date for this episode is 3018.2, I look at Catspaw as taking place during the third year of the Enterprise 5-year mission.
Gotcha.
And that theory is supported by the fact that in the third season, the star dates towards the end of the third season, the first number is a 5.
Right.
But we never saw anything beyond, at least not a live action Star Trek. So that is why I like to subscribe to my theory that the 3 years that Star Trek aired actually did encompass the 5-year mission of the Enterprise. Now, the animated series, the numbers do get into the 6s. And the animated series is actually considered canon, which is why the name James Tiberius Kirk, Tiberius, came from an animated episode. And also because we decided, you and me, Steve, breaking news, we are going to continue Enterprise incidents into the animated series when we are finished with the live action series.
It is a big deal. The and you know what, Scott? I think your system for star dates, if it can prove how Khan saw Chekhov, then I think your system, that's evidence that your system is accurate.
That's what I'm going with. I mean, after all these years, Steve, it was a eureka moment.
Amazing.
And you know what? For everybody listening, if you're down with me on my theory about why Chekhov was there during Space Seed, we just didn't saw him, hit me up on Twitter, Movie Mance, and let me know you were with me. Listen to what the man said.
So we're down on the planet. It's nighttime. It's foggy in a place that there shouldn't be fog. It's rocky. The sound is kind of creepy. And we suddenly get some life readings.
Now, well, here's my question, Steve.
Yes.
So Jackson is dead.
Yes.
Scott and Sulu are missing. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy beam down with no security guards.
Correct.
why? I mean,
well, I think we've established, and then it gets proven later, as you brought up a few episodes ago in The Ultimate Computer, the reason they pick a landing party is entirely because that's the characters that the writers wanted to have on the planet.
Right, yeah.
That's why. And we call up to the Enterprise, and we get to see this new character.
Report, mister.
I am only picking up physical impulses from the three of them.
This new character wearing a very funky wig.
It's terrible.
It's terrible. Poor Walter Koenig. But yes, there is Walter Koenig. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Ensign Chekhov. Catspaw is Walter Koenig's first of 36 episodes of Star Trek, but it was actually supposed to be a one-shot deal. And when Walter Koenig went to do a reading for the part, there was another actor there who he doesn't remember who it was. I would sure love to know who that was. That also read, and Walter Koenig was told, "Hey, come with me," and he was getting fitted for his uniform. That's how he found out that he got the job. But Walter Koenig was 30 years old at the time. Chekhov is supposed to be 22, so he wore a Beatles wig to look younger and appeal to a younger demographic. Also appeal to everyone who loved the Beatles and the Monkees. But the whole reason for a Russian character being on the bridge of the Enterprise came out of the Pravda newspaper, which was the official newspaper of the Communist Party, calling out Star Trek for not having a Russian crew member aboard the Enterprise. So Chekhov was Gene Roddenberry's response to Pravda pointing this out, and that is why we had a Russian aboard the Enterprise. Casting director Joe D'Agostà suggested him after working with him on Alfred Hitchcock Presents. The episode was Memo from Purgatory, which was written by Harlan Ellison. But Walter Koenig had made his first appearance on a 1962 episode of Combat. It was uncredited. He had also done episodes of Mr. Novak, the Lieutenant, Gidget, and of course, much, much later in the 90s, Babylon 5, where he played the recurring character of Bester.
I really wonder what it must have been like to be watching this on October 27th, 1967, and have this guy with a Russian accent. I think that must have seemed kind of crazy at that moment.
As long as they weren't like thrown by just how awful that wig was.
It's terrible.
But yeah, I mean, here we are in a space race with the Russians. And Steve, when this episode aired, it was after the Apollo 1 fire. And Apollo 7 had not gotten the Apollo program back on track. That wouldn't happen until 1968. So at this point, when this episode aired, the Russians were still kind of ahead of the Americans on the space race. And now here you have a Russian person aboard the bridge of the Enterprise. And by the way, no attention is drawn to the fact that he is Russian at all. He's just there. If anyone brought the Russian background to Chekhov, it was Chekhov himself.
Yeah. Well, and I think what it's saying, I mean, I think it makes a really bold statement, which is we're going to work this out. We're going to be friends.
Absolutely.
Captain, we are only registering on you. Captain Kirk!
Lieutenant, can you hear me?
And the fog is getting thicker. And
Leon's
getting larger. And they get their phasers out, and then we start to hear groaning and moaning, and then we get three witches.
When I saw this episode for the first time as a kid, it was during the fall, so it was already getting dark at like 4:30. So when this episode came on at 7 o'clock at night, it was already dark outside, and I was watching this episode in my basement by myself, and you hear the moaning and the groaning of these three witches, which may or may not be right out of Macbeth, most likely not, based on their poetry. But those
It's not double, toil and trouble.
No, it ain't. It's leave it all or leave your heads. But those three witches, played by Rhodey Kogan, Gail Bonney, and Mary Esther Denver. Did you ever wonder what their names were? Now you know.
I've been waiting to find out. So I'll say at the beginning of I literally have no idea what's going on in this episode. The more I think about it, the more I don't understand what was happening. But right now we have these three creepy, moaning witch projections warning Kirk to go away or you will meet your end.
And Kirk says to Spock,
Comment.
Very bad poetry, Captain.
I love it. And I love Kirk's response.
A more useful comment, Mr. Spock.
And what we hear is it wasn't real.
that's useful.
Yeah. So here's my question. And I'm going to ask this question of you many times.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Why do Sylvia and Korob, why are they doing this?
Well, that is a great question. And I think that's a question that I need to answer when we get deeper into this deep dive.
Okay.
But they do have, and by the way, your question is the answer to another epiphany
I can't wait.
that I had about this episode that may or may not help you appreciate this episode more than you already do, or don't.
Let me ask you a different question.
Yeah.
When Kirk sees these witches, is he scared?
No.
Agreed.
I think he's curious.
Yeah, that's weird.
But he's not scared.
Agreed.
Because right now, a paramount importance to him is where are Scott and Sulu? What killed Crewman Jackson?
Well, and frankly, Kirk has seen a lot scarier stuff than 3 witch projections saying weird poetry.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
And then we get hit by some wind and knocked around in a way that is not very convincing to me. And then we see a castle and hear trumpets.
Okay, this castle, by the way, the budget for the castle was $9,375. The final cost for this castle, because it was built on weekends, so there was overtime, was $13,416, which was definitely one of the reasons why this episode went over budget. And I got to say, Steve, for an episode that may be underwhelming, you cannot help but be impressed by the production design and the production values of this episode. That castle is really impressive. The way that the fog disappears.
I think they handled the fog great.
They did an amazing, amazing job with the fog. And I think that the production design of this episode is one of the things that makes this episode better than it probably deserves to be given credit for, even by me.
I kind of go like, because to me, it's all, well, how does it resonate emotionally? And even though visually, I think they did a good job, I'm having no emotional reaction to it at all. And yes, Matt Jeffries, he did a great job designing it. And those guys working overtime, they did a great job building it. That doesn't mean I like it, But we head towards the castle. I think this is really slow. It takes a long time to sort of get to the castle.
And at one point, as Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are advancing towards the castle, they walk a little down, and the fog is so thick that they almost disappear.
I love it. Yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah.
Here, okay, you know what? I'm going to give a small spoiler to my feeling about it, which is that the reason I ask whether or not Kirk is scared by the witches is that, and the fact that he's really not, the whole idea of this is that this stuff is scary, but nothing is actually scary. And so, like, going slow is classic horror movie stuff. We're moving through a dark space. There's lots of fog. I can't see what's happening. And that would make you scared, except I'm not scared.
When you watch the original Dracula from 1931, it has that same tension building build-up, especially when he's still in, Transylvania. There are a lot of moments where there's no dialogue.
Yes.
It's just, it's mood. It's establishing mood and atmosphere. And I think this episode actually does a really great job of that. And I think that's Joseph Pepe.
Except, this is the difference. In Dracula, there are people in the movie who are scared.
That's true. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is that I can't be scared unless one of the characters is scared.
But if Kirk is looking at this going like, this looks really familiar, is somebody playing... And he goes, they feel like this is a joke. Yeah, exactly.
Well, and that's what makes this episode, one of the many things that makes this episode go like, well, I don't understand what's going on here. So they go inside. We hear the hiss of a black cat. And Kirk does maybe have a slightly scared reaction.
He's startled.
3 witches. What appears to be a castle and a black cat. If we weren't missing 2 officers and a third one dead, I'd say someone was playing an elaborate trick or treat on us.
Now, I love Spock's reaction. Spock goes, trick or treat. And Kirk looks at him and goes, you'd be a natural.
I'll explain it one day.
Now, that is Gene Kuhn. Gene Kuhn
of course
added that line.
But, here, and this is the thing. But that means it's not scary. If they're joking like this isn't like I'm scared joking. This isn't scary.
They're gone, Mr. DeSalle.
Check for malfunctions.
And this is where we get the first sort of pushback of what Chekhov's character is.
I did, sir, as soon as it happened.
They may have encountered a magnetic field or some other obstruction. Mr. Chekhov, recalibrate your sensors. If you need help.
And I love the look. Chekhov is like...
I can do it, sir. I'm not that green.
Now, the thing is, Michael Barrier, so obviously familiar because this is his third episode of Star Trek. He was in Squire Gothos, and he was in This Side of Paradise.
Right.
So in both of those shows, he was wearing a gold shirt. Now he's wearing a red one. Mm-hmm. So he was promoted to assistant chief engineer. Now, the plan at the time was to have someone in engineering during those moments when Kirk and Spock were not on the Enterprise and Scotty had to take command, so that there was someone in engineering who was capable and able while Scotty was on the bridge. But because the show was so focused on basically the big three, where the other four, should sort of just get what they could, he ultimately was not needed, and Barrier just, left a series that he was never really officially a part of in the first place.
Well, what's weird about it, and and no disrespect to the actor, but they're characters that pop and they're characters that don't. And I don't think and I think this is his worst performance in this episode.
I agree.
I think he is so stiff, and frankly, Walter Koenig shines by comparison. The other thing I was going to say, this framing of who Chekhov is as the young guy, I'm not that green, the new kid on the Enterprise. I don't think there are other episodes that kind of hint at that, but I actually don't think that's who Chekhov is. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's not kind of how because one of the things that happens when you cast someone is when you have an idea of a part before you cast someone, that's the idea of the part. And then you put someone in the part and that's them now. And they adapt. And as you write for them, you adapt to who they really are. Frankly, do you know what I think that Chekhov was trying to be in the way they conceived the part? Is Wesley Crusher. That's how he's behaving in this episode. It's very much like Wesley Crusher.
Oh, wow. Now, what I'll say about Walter Koenig is that, we just went through a whole season where we saw our main characters find their way. Some of them found it right away, like Shatner, obviously. I mean, he was born to play Kirk, and he had him down from the beginning. Some took a little while longer, like the way Leonard Nimoy certainly took a little bit to kind of really grasp the character of Spock. But now you're introducing a new semi-regular series character to Star Trek. So now it's Walter Koenig's turn to try and find his way as Chekhov. And I think he does that rather quickly. I mean, when you get to episodes like Amok Time and Who Mourns for Adonais, where he was featured pretty prominently, that by that point, he had already kind of had him down.
It'll be interesting. It's so funny because I've never paid the attention to Chekhov that I did to Spock. But now that I'm thinking about it, it's going to be really interesting as we go forward in production order going, what are the signposts of like, oh, there he's starting to get it. That's who Chekhov's going to become.
Totally.
That's going to be fun to do. We're back down on the planet. We have a door slam behind them that's sort of creepy, and we're hearing very dramatic music. This is all new score, right?
That's right, all new score.
And we see a cat running in the shadows in the background, and the cat makes noise, and they fall down through some trap door, and they're all unconscious on the rubble, and the camera tilts up to reveal the cat standing over them.
But it also tilts back because you just saw the three of them lying on the floor. Mm-hmm. So there's another shot where it looks like they're lying, but they're actually standing in the dungeon.
Oh yeah, that's true.
It's a really, really great
cool choice.
Edit. Now, of course, as you know, most of Star Trek was filmed on stages 9 and 10. Stage 9 was where they had the Enterprise sets. Stage 10 is where they built everything else, basically the planets or other sets. But in this case, a temporary Star Trek stage was built on stage 8, and that's where they filmed the scenes in the dungeon and then the corridor outside of the dungeon, which they started filming on day 4.
Dungeons, curses, skeletons and Iron Maidens, they're all Earth manifestations.
Here's something that I chuckle when I see it. So, they're all there in the dungeon, they're all coming to, and Kirk and Spock are talking first, and Kirk turns to talk to McCoy, and he goes, "Bones, Doc."
It's one of the best. It's great. It's great because there's that skeleton hanging there.
Yeah, the bones are right there. He says, "Doc."
Could this be an Earth parallel development of some sort?
Which is something we've run across before in Star Trek.
None of this parallels any human development. It's more like a human nightmare.
Okay, so another question. So we've heard that this is like not any real time in Earth. This is pulled out of what scares us in our subconscious. Where did Sylvia and Korob get these images?
All right, Steve, I was going to wait.
Okay.
I was going to wait for this epiphany about this episode.
All right.
Because you're asking absolutely valid questions, and I can't answer them without revealing the other epiphany I had about Catspaw.
Okay.
So you're right to ask, where the heck did Korob and Sylvia get this image of a castle and a dungeon and this grand room that we're soon going to see?
I think I have a guess of where you're going.
Okay. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Where did Trelane get all these images?
Oh, you're not going where I thought you were going.
Okay. I'm going to tell you when I got the epiphany, but since you're asking these right questions, and I don't want to hold it any longer, I saw Catspaw as the Squire of Gothos of season 2.
Yes, I totally see that connection.
There are so many similarities. Just like Trelane, and we're going to get into more of this as we go along, but Korob and Sylvia have incredible powers.
Mm-hmm.
They read humans a little wrong, just like Trelane thought, like this is what you like. This is, and then Kirk says, actually, you're thinking of an Earth from 900 years past. Sylvia and Korob have gotten it wrong too, because they're pulling images of Halloween out of their heads, not actual Earth stuff. But also, Korob and Sylvia, like Trelane, is seduced by power. Mm-hmm. And seduced by emotion.
Yes.
Because just like
100%, I agree with all this. Yeah.
Just like Trelane, like he wanted to feel the rush of emotion.
Yeah.
Like when he does the chase during the most dangerous game towards the end of the Squire of Gothos. And they both use devices as the source of their powers.
Yep.
We don't know the name of Trelane's device, but we know that the name of the device that Korob and Sylvia use is the Transmuter.
Well, and they both say that the device isn't the source of the power, but it is some mechanism that helps them focus.
Part of a bigger thing.
Yeah.
Right? When Kirk shut out the mirror in the Squire of Gothos and Trelane says, did you think that was the only instrument at my command? So there are so many similarities between the Squire of Gothos and Catspaw. And I think a lot of the motivations that Korob and Sylvia have are very similar to the motivations that Trelane had.
I agree.
Now, Trelane was a spoiled brat. He was a big kid, and he was playing with the Enterprise crew like they were Tinker Toys.
Yes.
That's not what Korob and Sylvia are after. They need Kirk and humans more than Trelane needed Kirk in Squire Gothos. It was more out for amusement in Squire Gothos, and this is more of a there's a sustenance that Korob and Sylvia have that they're getting out of being around humans. Now, I still don't think this is a perfect episode by any means. I still have issues with it too. But of all these years, Steve, of watching this episode, I never made the connection between Catspaw and the Squire of Gothos until I sat down for my deep dive of Enterprise.
There's definitely some DNA that they share. There are things about what they need from the crew of the Enterprise that I want to come back to later on. But you have not answered my question.
What is your question?
My question is, why are we in a castle? Where did they get these images?
Well, that's
because Trelane got it by looking literally through a telescope from 900 light years away and was looking at the past.
Now, here's the question. We don't know what happened on Pyrus 7 before Kirk, Spock, and McCoy beamed down. Like, we don't know which version of Sylvia and Korob that Scotty and Sulu and Jackson saw. Did they see them in human form? Did they see them in their natural form that we see at the end of the episode? Do we see them in another form? Did they have another form? And did they look into the minds of Jackson and Scotty and Sulu and go, oh, wait a minute, let's try something else here? And that's where they got the image of the castle.
So
out of that, I think they read the minds of Scotty and Sulu and Jackson. And that's where they got these images. And that's why Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, that's why they beamed out to these images.
So I think that's probably likely because, and I was thinking as you were, remember when you said, here's my epiphany, I said, oh, wait, I think I know where you're going. I didn't think you were going to Trelane. What I thought you were going to is that while it doesn't make any sense that they got these images out of Kirk's brain, because, and he has no response to them like they're important images. If this was something important in your subconscious and you were suddenly there, you would have a reaction to it. That's not what happens with Kirk. Well, Scotty, who is from Scotland, probably grew up around castles and things like that. And what is Sulu obsessed with? Antiquity and sword fighting and things like that. So maybe, and I think it's a stretch, we could say that, oh, they looked into Scotty and Sulu's subconscious and came up with some of this stuff.
Here's why I agree with that. Because in addition to your absolutely accurate assessment of Sulu's subconscious, in Wolf on the Fold, in the beginning of Wolf in the Fold, which actually comes obviously later in this season, the beginning, in the teaser part of the episode, Scotty asks the dancer, says, do you want to go for a walk? It's a fine foggy night tonight, like in Aberdeen.
Yeah.
And the outside of Argelius looks a lot like, because of the Argelius is very foggy.
Okay.
Just like what we see in Catspaw. And that image that Scotty has of Aberdeen was in his head, and that was where Sylvia and Korob sort of picked up a lot of that stuff.
I still have more questions. We will get to them as we go along. But I like this. I think the Scotty Sulu thing, I think it's a stretch, but I do think we could say that that's where it comes from.
Okay, I'm down with that. Yes.
And as we're talking, the door opens and in walks Sulu and Scotty. And at first, we're thrilled to see them.
Scotty, Sulu.
And then they do not respond.
Scotty, put down the phaser. Scotty.
It was Dorothy Fontana's idea to have Scotty and Sulu under Sylvia's control. In the earlier versions, there were two crew members named Jackson and Saunders who were under the trance of Sylvia and Korob, because it was in the earlier version that Sulu died. So it was Dorothy Fontana's idea, like wait a minute, we're going to bring in these two unknown crew members. It's not going to mean anything to the viewer that these mysterious crew members are holding Kirk, Spock, and McCoy hostage. Let's make them people we know. And I think that she was smart
100%
to make it Scotty and Sulu.
Totally.
And when you're watching, if you're looking closely at Scotty holding the phaser, you see that he is missing a finger.
Oh, one of the few times you get to see that.
One of the few times you get to see this. So he was wounded by, again, Jimmy Doohan, fought in World War II, fought in D-Day, but he was wounded by friendly fire and hit in the chest and the leg and the right hand.
Wow.
And he still had the strength to be the chief engineer of the Starship Enterprise.
They appear to be drugged, John. Look at their eyes. Hardly blink at all.
Neither did Jackson, just before he collapsed.
And they walk up sort of zombie-like and start to unlock our people. They're walking out with them. And then just as they go out, and as we knew that they would, Kirk feigns a little weakness and then is on the attack. And right in the middle of the attack, we hear the word stop.
Stop!
And we are somewhere else. And there's this bald guy standing in front of them, and that is Korob.
Played by Theodore Marcuse. On TV, he was on shows like Have Gun Will Travel, Wagon Train, Peter Gunn, Perry Mason, The Twilight Zone, The Untouchables, Batman, which is where I remember him, and The Monkees. But he also was in some movies. He was in The Cincinnati Kid, and he was in the Elvis movie Harem Scarum. Now, this episode aired on October 27th, 1967. 1 month later, on November 29th, 1967, Theodore Marcuse was killed in a car accident at age 47.
Oh, wow.
Whoever you are, you've proven your skill at creating illusion. Now I want to know why and what you've done to my men.
Korob's outfit, if that looked familiar to some viewers when this episode aired in October of 1967, that is because this outfit was previously worn by the television legend Bob Denver in Gilligan's Island.
Oh my God, really?
On the episode Lovely Secret Admirer, which Star Trek was used to hand me down from Gilligan's Island,
That's
which
hilarious.
I think is hilarious. That episode aired in January of 1967. But if you were really in tune and the sort of person who nitpicks every little thing, you would know that outfit came from Gilligan's Island.
That is hilarious.
Where did your race get this ridiculous predilection for resistance? You examine any object, you question everything. Is it not enough to accept what is?
Not when one of my men is dead because of it, and 2 others turned into mindless.
Oh, not mindless. These 2 are merely controlled, Captain Kirk.
Yeah, he knows his name.
He knows your name, dude.
Yeah. I love that look that Kirk gives him, like, you know me?
And one thing that we notice is as he is talking, he is also petting the black cat.
Who are you? Why did you bring us here?
My name is Korob, and as for bringing you here, it was you, quite contrarily, insisted upon coming. You were warned to stay away.
Well, he was warned to stay away, but he's not going to leave his 2 potentially surviving crew members alone on the planet. Of course he's going to go down and check him out.
Why was he warned to stay away?
He was warned to stay away by dead crewman Jackson. Okay.
Right. Why?
But before that, yeah, that's the thing I don't understand.
No, this is what I'm saying.
You're right. You're right. Like why? Okay. So if Korob and Sylvia need humans,
which again, why do they need humans?
Because I think Sylvia kind of says why she needs them.
Yes, but that's not their mission. She is breaking from the mission by saying, I want sensation and all this stuff.
She gets really into the sensation of it. She like that's the part that seduces her.
But we never find out why they actually wanted these humans. And if you wanted the humans, why are you trying to scare them?
I agree.
And why are you trying to keep them away?
Like why? Okay, if they came here from the Andromeda Galaxy, and like, what was their purpose? What did they want? And the Enterprise is on its mission to explore strange new worlds. Pyrus 7 was definitely a doozy in terms of strange, new, and a world. But,
sure.
But yeah, you're right. Like, but the motive is on very, very shaky ground.
Because like you bring up the Trelane thing, Trelane's motive is really clear. He's a kid. He wants to play with toys. They stimulate him. He's enjoying that. Totally get it.
Absolutely.
This, not so much. And what's interesting is he asks like, why all this mumbo jumbo? And then the cat talks to Korob.
Oh. Oh no, I assure you it was not that, Captain.
Which, by the way, this is not going to be the last talking cat we have in Star Trek. We're going to have one in Assignment Earth.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
And Assignment Earth, a talking cat that turns into a woman.
Yep. Exactly the same thing. And then the cat interrupts again.
Oh, I'm told that I've been an inattentive host, gentlemen. You will join me for something to refresh yourselves?
Again, I don't understand why Sylvia is being a cat at this moment. I don't understand why Sylvia is saying that that I forgot myself and I'm not being a good host. Why is Sylvia doing any of these things? It doesn't.
I agree with you. I mean, by this point, the fact that Korob and Sylvia had established this atmosphere of a basically Halloween.
Yeah.
That this was just part of it. That the black cat was part of the lore of Halloween that they got out of the minds of Sulu. And Scotty.
But again, it's like to what and this is the thing. Here is the difference between this and the alternative factor for me. Visually, it's really good. I like the performances are good. Like there's more interesting things happening in this episode. But I'm not sure that it makes any more sense. Maybe it makes a little bit more sense.
I agree with you. Yeah. I mean, when you really, really break it down, like what do Korob and Sylvia really want? Like what was their mission? And this thing about Korob telling Kirk, well, you were warned to stay away. But we weren't warned to stay away before you killed one of my guys and took 2 others.
And why kill them and why take them?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's one of the, like a fundamental thing of screenwriting when you have a bad guy is the bad guy's plan should make sense, even if the bad guy never gets to do their plan. And the example I would always use is Die Hard. Hans has a plan. And if John McClane doesn't show up, Hans steals the bearer bonds and he escapes in the ambulances because his plan is all worked out. It all makes sense. He doesn't get to do his plan because John McClane shows up. Here, and generally in screenwriting, in this kind of a story, you have to start with the bad guys. And they really didn't, And we find out some sense that they can read minds to some degree.
I do not create the legend, Captain. I merely report it.
You are the different one, Mr. Spock. You do not think like the others. There are no colors to your patterns of logic. There's only black and white.
He doesn't believe in trick or treat.
Yep.
I love that. I don't understand that reference.
What's interesting, his line is interesting.
I do not understand that reference. Therefore, it also is of no importance.
Which is weird because he sort of says, because the first thing he says when we show up is, why don't you just accept what's around you? And now he is doing that. He is not questioning the trick or treat reference. He just goes, I don't understand it. It has no importance.
But see, Trelane, I like that Trelane was like, oh dear, have I made an error in time?
Yeah.
How fallible of me. So you're right. Trelane has he has a motive. There's a reason for all of this. In this episode, the foundation for it just does not, it's not sustainable. Right. I agree with you.
Gentlemen, I can be most hospitable.
He waves his magic wand and there's food and he invites them to sit down. Again, this is where I thought of Trelane, by the way.
Yeah, this is where I had the epiphany.
Because he says to McCoy, try the wine, you'll find it's excellent, which is exactly what Trelane does, and the wine had no flavor.
Exactly. But this is the moment I was waiting to get to where I was going to tell you that this is like the Squaragothos of season 2.
What I wonder is they never try it. Would the wine have been excellent?
Yeah, would the food have had any taste?
Yeah.
Right. That's a good point.
Well, because clearly wherever they got these images of Halloween and stuff, they didn't get a good read. They didn't really understand what they created something but didn't really understand it. So how could they have the wine have good flavor?
You'll find us most uncooperative unless you start explaining yourself.
Hopefully, I can change that attitude.
And waves the wand, and there the plates are now filled with jewels.
And I love just that Kirk is like, we don't, these mean nothing to us, because the idea of currency doesn't mean anything in this area of the 23rd century.
Well, this is the very first, I think, of the direction that Star Trek is going to go that is ends up being far more problematic than it should be, which is how does the economy of Star Trek work?
Exactly.
Because in Mudd's Women, in The Devil in the Dark, in all sorts of places, we talk about money. Mm-hmm, there is such a thing as money. People are working for profit.
Yeah, talk about like in Devil in the Dark when Kirk is telling at the
end about the deal with the Horta
being embarrassingly rich.
Yeah. And so now this is the first one we're kind of saying maybe that's not the case. And I have no problem with there having some different economy in Star Trek. They just never figured out what it was.
That's a good point.
Right. And so what happened was they took an economy that made sense and replaced it with something that didn't make sense. But these jewels are clearly not a temptation. By the way, they're not a temptation for me. They look really fake.
Oh, they totally look fake.
They look real. And the mistake they made was they have giant, huge jewels. It's really hard to make those look good.
A fortune of them for each of you, if you leave here without further inquiry.
Which means he's still trying to get rid of them.
But why?
But why?
Right. Yeah. Why were they? Why did he warn them to stay away? Like, what are they after? Why are they here?
Yeah. No. I'm literally. And what's funny is I went back and rewatched a couple of scenes to see if I had missed an explanation of what they want, and I don't think there is one. And this is very much, again, it's like Trelane.
Well, perhaps I have made a small mistake. Nevertheless, you have passed the tests.
What's the test?
Yeah.
Why were they testing them?
So did you really want us to stay away?
Yeah.
Or it's okay that we're here now because we passed it? What was the test?
Well, and did you want me to say no to taking the jewels? And that's, now that you know I'm greedy, not greedy, I've passed the test? But why? What is it you're trying to get?
Yeah, I feel like there should have been another rewrite here.
But you were warned to stay away, and yet you came to save your comrades. That proves loyalty. Your bravery was tested, and you did not frighten. And despite my failure with these bright baubles, I perceive that you cannot be bribed. In many ways, you are quite admirable.
Now, this is implying that they wanted people with these positive qualities to do something. but we don't know what that something is. And in particular, why kill Jackson? Like if the goal was we want to get people with admirable qualities because we want to do something, which we never explain, why kill a dude?
Yeah. Why kill Jackson?
Well, and this is definitely a wanting to have your cake and eat it too and failing. Where like, oh, we want a scary opening where there's a dead guy with a warning voice that comes out of his mouth. That'll be really creepy.
But see, this does actually raise the stakes a little over Squire Agathos because Troy never killed anybody.
Totally. But it doesn't make sense. So it ends up working against you later on.
Oh, quite right. Go at once, yes.
Part of me is also going, what's the cat saying? Why did the cat leave? Why was she not Sylvia from the beginning?
That's a great question. Why have Sylvia as the cat in the beginning when Kirk, Spock, and McCoy first get to the castle?
Yeah.
Like, what was the purpose of that?
Why is Sylvia hiding?
Well, Sylvia is not hiding anymore.
Yep, she shows up.
She walks in the door. Sylvia, played by Antoinette Bauer, who was 35 when she made this episode. She was on TV shows like Have Gun Will Travel, Wagon Train, Thriller, Perry Mason, Mannix, and Mission Impossible. On film, you could see her as Mrs. Hammond in the 1980 horror classic Prom Night.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah. Good movie.
Much scarier probably than Catspaw.
You like to think of yourselves as complex creatures, but you're flawed. One gains admittance to your minds through many levels.
And while she's saying this whole thing, she is playing with her necklace.
There are unguarded entrances to any human mind.
What's the deal with the necklace?
So the necklace, it was sort of putting McCoy into a trance. I don't know. The necklace, like Spock makes a comment about telepathy, but was the necklace the source of her power? Like, did the necklace tie into the transmuter?
There seems to be an implication that the necklace is like the transmuter, but it clearly isn't like the transmuter because there's only one transmuter. That becomes very clear later on.
The transmuter was the transmuter.
Right. And while this is happening, Kirk tosses the jewels at Scotty, grabs his phaser, and now he's got a phaser on them, says,
"Now I want the rest of our weapons and our equipment. I want some answers."
Put that weapon down. It seems so foolish of you to insist on demonstrations.
And she pulls out the Enterprise, a little Enterprise on a necklace chain, you know?
I love that mini Enterprise. Every time I do watch this episode, I think, man, I would love to have kept that.
That prop has got to have been auctioned at some thing for...
Well, I'll tell you where it ends up in a minute.
Okay.
In the mythology of your race, this is called sympathetic magic. Jackson, the crew member who returned to the ship. I made an image of him. In the essence of my thoughts, the image was Jackson. And when I killed the image and knew that it was dead, he died.
That's voodoo.
Totally voodoo. And I like that dialogue. I think that's I like in the essence of my thoughts, the image was Jackson.
And she sold it.
Yeah, totally. I think it's great. I also think it's weird that her magic powers comes from a thing that she got from them. Do you know what I mean? But it's fine. And I think it's really cool.
Now, signal your ship.
It's like in Errand of Mercy where they go, call your ship.
Mm-hmm.
And she holds that little Enterprise over a candle.
And then we go to the bridge of the Enterprise where it is burning up. Everyone is sweating and perspiring.
Mm-hmm. Reading, mister.
It's up 60 degrees for the past 30 seconds.
And the last image of Act 2 is on a sweating, heavily wigged Chekhov staring into the sensor in fear.
Well, it's so funny. This is just dumb. But I always thought they were heating up the exterior of the Enterprise, I guess because the candle was underneath the exterior. But then I went, no, I think it's the inside of the Enterprise that's heating up.
Well, the Enterprise it's a pretty powerful starship.
Yeah.
You know, the only other time we ever saw it get really, really hot inside was when they were chasing the ship from Deneba in the beginning of Operation Annihilate, and it got really close to the star. But shouldn't the Enterprise be powerful enough to stay cool when it gets closer to solar activity? I have to say.
Well, that's why I suddenly went, oh, because if you said the whole of the Enterprise went up 60 degrees, Well, that's not that much. But if you're inside a room that suddenly went up 60 degrees. Yeah, I think it's inside.
The interior rose 60 degrees.
This is a very silly little thing to explore, but welcome to Enterprise
Welcome to Enterprise Incidents.
And that, of course, is the end of Act 2. And we're back in Act 3. And Kirk grabs Sylvia's hand and pulls the Enterprise away from the candle and says, "You've won."
Yeah, he puts his phaser down, takes the phaser from Spock, and surrenders. And she says, "Your ship is safe."
You've seen something of our science. Now tell us about yours.
I'd rather know more about yours. You call it magic, you call it science. It seems to be unrelated to both of them.
I don't think that line makes any sense. I don't know what it means to be unrelated to both of them. He's seen all sorts of amazing science, with Trelane being an example.
Yeah.
Doing stuff like this. He's seen magic things, with Charlie X and with all sorts of other people. And he's seen technology that doesn't look anything like his. So I don't think this idea that this doesn't look like magic or science.
Yeah.
I don't think it makes sense.
I agree.
But you seem to do with your mind what we do with tools.
Again, it's right out of Squire of Gothos. Some of the dialogue almost is exactly out of Squire of Gothos.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I'm surprised, isn't that weird? All these years, I never made that connection until now.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. You and I both made this for different points and for different reasons, but we both saw the stuff. And what's interesting at this point is Korob starts to get into the conversation. He goes,
"Yes, we can change the molecular structure."
Korob, you talk too much.
And there's a really weird close-up of him that's very jarring.
Yeah.
He's almost looking right at camera, which is a very unusual thing to do. It's a close-up. It's in a wide-angle lens, almost a fisheye, so the space is really distorted. Yeah. Yep. It is unlike any other shot so far in Star Trek.
No, I agree with you.
You kept Scott and Sulu as Catspaw to lure us down here.
I just want to point out that Catspaw is a term that nobody knows.
Okay, Catspaw.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Because Catspaw is a term that means a dupe or a person used by another to do unlawful work.
I think it is weird to use a term, but did you know that term?
No, not before I got into it with this episode. I did not.
I think it is really weird to title an episode with a term where nobody knows what that term is and then have someone reference the term that nobody knows what the term is to explain what's going on in the episode when the episode doesn't quite make sense.
How did you know we'd come?
Oh, we didn't have to know. They knew.
And again, it goes to okay, well, why do you... I mean, they could have just called up and said, "Hey, guys, do you want to come down and talk?" We don't quite understand. I still don't understand it. I'll stop hitting it. Okay.
Enough of this. You will tell us what we want to know.
What do they want to know?
What do they want to know?
They literally have not asked them a question.
It's too late for threats. You let me contact the ship. How long do you think it'll be before a search party arrives?
And then Korob says, "Some time, Captain. Quite some time." So then he uses the transmuter to put a block around the mini Enterprise. And by the way, that Enterprise with the block around it is at the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum.
Nice.
So you asked where it was. They filmed the scene with the little Enterprise over the flame, over the candle, and then they had it encased. And ever since that
it's the same one.
It's the same one. Yeah, they didn't build two separate things.
Interesting. Let me just say, one of the great things, Scott, about doing the show with you is that I can ask a ridiculously bizarre question, and 9 times out of 10, you're going to give me an answer.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah.
That's what we do here on Enterprise Incidents. But it was at this moment, I have to say, when Korob puts the force field around, the little block around the little Enterprise, which puts the force field around the ship itself. So we are seeing Korob and Sylvia display incredible powers.
Yes.
How many times have we seen this now?
Many.
Where we've seen powers that are greater than that of the Enterprise. We've seen this with, obviously, Trelane, whose source also came from a machine.
Right.
But we also saw this with the Thasians, with the Metrons, with the Organians.
Yep.
And how we have another situation, regardless of the fact that the foundation for their motive is practically non-existent.
Yes.
It is another alien species that commands great power. And what do we always say about great power going back to where no man has gone before?
Of all else, a God needs compassion?
Absolute power corrupts.
Corrupts absolutely. As soon as you said, "What do we say about great power?" all I could hear was it will comes great responsibility.
Yep.
But I was like, that's not Star Trek.
That's Spider-Man.
Yeah. And she says, take them to their cell, and Scotty gets the phaser, and he starts leading everyone off, including Bones. And she says, the doctor will stay.
Oh, that's not a good sign.
Your turn will be next, Captain. It makes little difference.
And we're back on the Enterprise, and all of these cuts back to the Enterprise about them. We're going to do something to break out of these force fields. They're almost all totally useless. You know, they exist because we need to check back in with the Enterprise.
Right, exactly.
But they end up having no effect on the show at all.
And I do agree with you. I think that of the three performances that Michael Barrier gave us to Sal, this one is his weakest. He's so stiff.
Well, and frankly, part of it is what he's been given to do, is that he had a very clear motivation in Squire of Gothos, is that who he was. He was aggressive. He was impatient.
Yeah,
you know,
bit of a hothead.
Yeah, and here he's just saying the lines that aren't that great, including his line here, which is,
maybe we can't break it, but I'll bet you credits to Navy beans we can put a dent in it.
Yeah.
That is a line that is so anachronistic. It's kind of anachronistic in 1967. You know, it is a World War II line.
Yeah, for sure.
We're back in the dungeon.
I love that during this discussion, Spock calls Captain Kirk Jim.
Yeah.
You know, it's always interesting when you look at the moments where Spock breaks down the structure of command to refer to Kirk as Jim instead of Captain. And it's a vulnerable moment. It's subtle.
Yeah.
Like when he says when they're looking at the tricorder and sitting on the edge forever and says, we must stop him, Jim. But he refers to Kirk as Jim here. And it doesn't have the same power as City.
Yeah.
But I like the little moments like that.
You know what just occurred to me, and this is a totally minor point, but sometimes I call you Scott, and sometimes I go, you know, I'll write you and say, hey, Mance, what's up? Or I'll say, hey, or, you know, something like that. I don't generally put a lot of thought into which one I use. Spock does.
Yes, he does.
He has chosen to say Jim or to say Captain. Mm-hmm. That's, you know, his brain is not capable of just saying it one way or another. There is a reason that he does it.
There's a reason a reason when he chooses to use the word Jim.
Yeah.
Jim. All these things that we've seen, to an Earthman like yourself, they must seem quite familiar.
And then Kirk says, I couldn't quite hear what he says. He says, I think, startled, not rational. And I go like, are you saying you were startled? Which he kind of was when he heard the cat hiss at the very beginning.
I refer you to the psychological theory of the racial subconscious. The universal myths, symbols.
Ghosts, witches, you mean?
And dungeons, and castles, and black cats. They all belong to the twilight world of consciousness.
So first of all, what I think he's kind of referencing is the idea of the Jungian subconscious or the universal subconscious. I think this is a weird, not going to get into Jung, and I wouldn't be really capable of doing it if I wanted to, but like the idea that these images are part of a racial subconscious is really weird, and I don't think it quite works. And in part of the reason is Kirk's not scared of it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
He's not scared.
Like, so the idea that this is part of some universal subconscious, you know, doesn't quite work. Well, and this is why I think they should have made the choice to make this scary. And maybe they were trying to make it scary, but if they were, then Shatner's performance is ruining it.
Yeah, I don't know how scary they were trying to make it. I think they were trying to establish, obviously, a setting, but by not taking it seriously, by not being scared by it, we're establishing that Kirk, especially Kirk, is one step ahead of them. And I think that shows intelligence and that shows strength.
Yeah.
You know, on his part. I don't think that has to do with his performance. I don't think that Kirk would be scared by this.
No, I agree. I think that's what I think we're kind of saying the same thing, is that if they wanted it to be scary, then they should have come up with stuff that scared Kirk, and then Shatner should have been scared. You know, but that's not what they're kind of trying to do both at the same time. Isn't this, because the next line they say,
Korob seemed quite puzzled by your reaction to the environment he'd provided.
He expected me to react as though we're all normal.
Trelane expected them to react like it was all normal because he didn't realize he had looked at the wrong time. But did they think that this is the Kirk world, or did they create a world that they thought would scare Kirk? Those aren't the same things.
Right now, it's a good point.
You know,
like, did they create this world to scare Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. Not that Spock would get scared.
Well, and then why would they expect them to react like it was normal if they were trying to create something that was scary?
But maybe they were just trying to create something, and that was the image that they got out of the minds of Scotty and Sulu. And, for whatever reason, that was the image. That was the prominent image. But I don't know if that they were deliberately trying to use that to scare them. But maybe they were. I don't know. That's a great question.
Maybe the producers looked at the broadcast schedule and saw they had an episode coming out 4 days before Halloween and said, oh, well, let's do some Halloween stuff, like some castles and some black cats.
Well, when the pitch was given, the producers said, this is perfect. We got to air this during Halloween. So it was produced, like I said, as a holiday special for Halloween.
The other thing that comes out as they're discussing is they come out the fact that she had said creatures like yourselves. And I like, by the way, that as they're speculating on what kind of creatures they are, Kirk looks over at the skeleton that's hanging next to him. That's another fun use of the skeleton.
But this, by the way, this conversation between Kirk and Spock, where they're trying to deduce what's happening, reminds me of the conversation in The Squire of Gothos between Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, right before Kirk challenges Troy into a duel.
Mm-hmm. What it reminded me of is in Return of the Archons, where they say, hey, we can't let this society stand. And they're literally in a dungeon, totally powerless, deciding they're going to take out a whole planet. And here they're doing the same thing. They say,
and I don't like hostile strangers showing such an acute interest in our galaxy, our world, Spock. Not at all like friendly visitors. We're going to have to stop them. Cold.
But at the moment, they look at the hands and the wrists, and then the door opens, and now McCoy is one of the zombie people.
I like Kirk's response. Bones.
And I like that McCoy kind of throws Kirk, you know?
Yeah, and Kirk kind of spins around like he's going to sock him.
Yeah.
So after Scotty and Sulu and now McCoy go to extract Kirk and Spock from the dungeon, we cut back to the grand room,
right,
with Sylvia and Korob. And Sylvia and Korob, as we've seen from a hinted scene prior, they are not on the same page with us. And this was actually Dorothy Fontana's idea to add conflict between Sylvia and Korob, because in just a short while, we're going to see Korob go to save Kirk and Spock from the dungeon. And there has to be a reason for this change, which is why Fontana added the conflict, so that we could see that Korob and Sylvia were not getting along. They did not have the same plan in mind.
But again, it highlights so specific. I think the idea is totally right. That is exactly what you have to do to split between the two. They don't have the same plan. And even the idea that Sylvia, which she goes into, is now obsessed with the sensations she gets from this new body, which is something we see in later episodes of Star Trek. That's okay. But starting with...
Forget what we were sent here for.
What were they sent here for?
Right, we don't even know.
I forget nothing. I'm not a puppet, Korob, like you.
You're a traitor.
I have no idea what they're talking about.
Cruel. You torture our specimens.
And that, too, is a new sensation. I find it stimulating.
That's where they sort of went off on different paths.
Right.
She likes the sensation that she's getting from being around people, humans.
Well, and specifically torturing them. And by the way, he calls them specimens at this point, which again kind of goes like, okay, is this a scientific experiment they're running? But we never pursue that. That doesn't seem to be what's going on.
There's a reference here that Korob makes to the old ones.
Oh, yeah.
We have a duty to the old ones. This episode is written by Robert Bloch.
The old ones.
The old ones. Right.
The ones who made us.
The ones from What a Little Girl's Made Of. So then, like, when I'm watching this and I hear Korob say about the old ones, and it's the same writer, and I was trying to connect What Are Little Girls Made Of to Catspaw, but there's no connection.
There's no connection. I was like, is Scott going to make a connection here? Here's what's weird too. Korob has the transmuter. Sylvia is saying, I could crush you like a bug. You're a weak fool.
But Sylvia was able to access the power of the transmuter with that pendant that she had around her neck.
It doesn't make sense. Yes, I think they're kind of doing something like that, but if this thing is really that powerful, why is Korob so weak?
He's weak-minded. I think he's just weak-minded.
He's more than weak-minded. As we go a little further, he doesn't able to do very much. So, Kirk enters under guard.
What now? wave your magic wand and destroy my mind, too?
There's no real damage to the mind, Captain. Simply a drain of knowledge and will.
You don't call that damage?
Why should I?
You'd know if you had compassion. A woman should have compassion. But I forget you're not a woman.
This is, again, I would say this is the thing we've seen with Kirk before, is looking for and exploiting what he perceives as a weakness.
And he does exploit it when he starts to move in and seduce her.
Yeah.
She is clearly stimulated by emotion, but she's never been touched like that by a man. And that is something that really, really stimulates her.
So what's interesting, I think this came up in one of the episodes, maybe it was Conscience of the King, I don't remember, but this is where it's really happening, is there is a classic Hollywood trope of the woman having to seduce the bad guy in order to escape, in order to get an advantage, in order to get information. That is just over and over again to the point where it is a fairly sexist cliche. And certainly, one that I would recommend screenwriters should avoid. But in Star Trek, it's Kirk. It's the dude that is doing this, and he does it many, many times throughout the show. And this is one of them. He has no problem using his sexuality to get an advantage.
Oh, absolutely not. Kirk, obviously, this is not the first time Kirk has used a woman to get information. I mean, one way, like with Lenore Caridian, it was sexual.
And what are little girls made of? He does it
right. In Miri, it's not obviously it's not sexual. But it's just he's using his charm.
Kim Darby finds it sexual.
Kim Darby,
she's definitely attracted to him.
Yeah, for sure. But I think Kirk knows what his strengths are, and here is a woman who is stimulated by emotion, and Kirk is introducing a whole new one to her that weakens her.
Yep, and she is obviously excited. She's obviously drawn to him, and she's trying to make a deal. And what's interesting too is there's something about Kirk, like why she had no trouble, controlling the other guys, but she doesn't want that for Kirk.
You seem to need us. Why?
Because you have knowledge which I lack, but where our abilities put together.
Now, again, I don't know what that means or what she's planning or what she actually wants, but he is definitely moving in on her. He touches her shoulder. He touches her face.
What happens if I go along?
Then everything would be ours together. I've never conceived of the idea of togetherness before. It excites me. You excite me. Why?
For the same reasons you excite me. You're a very beautiful woman.
And there's a big kiss, and then she pulls away and she says,
You find me beautiful, but I can be many women.
And then we get some transformations.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's fun. It's a fun scene, and you can see that she's becoming more vulnerable with Kirk because she is excited by the sensation, the attraction, the physical, sex almost.
And the three women that she transforms in, costume-wise, hair-wise, makeup-wise, they are three interesting, beautiful women. And I will say that as a boy in early puberty, having this woman who could turn into any woman you wanted, I went, boy, that seems like a cool thing.
Absolutely, yes.
You have a knack for giving me difficult choices.
And they kiss more, and the music is building, and he starts to ask questions.
Yep.
And he hears about the Transmuter.
It's the first time we've heard about the Transmuter.
And she's continuing to answer questions, and then there's a long kiss, and then she pulls away, angry, and says,
You are using me. You hold me in your arms, and there is no fire in your mind.
Now she's pissed.
Yeah.
Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned.
And man, Kirk's angry face at this moment.
You are using me.
Why not? You've been using me and my crew.
And the guards come in to take him away, and she yells,
We'll be swept away. You, your men, your ship, your worlds.
And then we're back on the Enterprise to hear that they're trying to punch through the force field, and it's not that important, and we're going to move on. We're in the dungeons, and in comes Korob to unlock them.
So Korob has now turned on Sylvia.
Yeah.
She's out of control. She won't listen to reason. She won't listen to Korob. Like now he realizes sorry guys, like just want to let you go, but they're not leaving without Scotty and Sulu.
Well, and one of the things he said is, I've released the model of your ship from the crystal, which is again evidence of why it was totally unimportant to cut back to the Enterprise.
Absolutely.
Because there was nothing, if the bad guy's going to take them out of the trap, why spend several scenes watching them try to get out of the trap?
And if they actually have a scene on the Enterprise where the Enterprise is actually making progress in getting through the force field.
What was the point?
Only to have Korob whisk it away. Like, why even bother?
Why bother?
Like, it should have been that the Enterprise got rid of the force field, not Korob.
It's what's really funny is in What Are Little Girls Made Of, Spock does figure it out and get down to the planet, and he is too late. It ends up that it made no difference because it was all done with Roger Corby and everything. But watching the half-breed moment and him figuring out and go down, that was all really fun because it was interesting. This is not. It's not fun. Yeah. It's just stuff that's happening. It's stuff that, when Star Trek is not good, is when people are talking about the technical thing they're doing with the Enterprise and there is no emotional resonance to it.
Absolutely. That's a great point.
We're funneling more energy into the deflector dish to do blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, I don't care.
I will say that the later shows, when they get into all that techno babble, they start using terminology that just make my eyes roll back into my head, and it bores me.
Yeah, we're reversing the polarity on the blah, blah, it's just
the quantum singularity to avoid the temporal effect on the event horizon of the temporal vortex. Huh?
Yeah, because this is the thing. It's all about humans. If humans are resonant, if humans are doing interesting things, if humans are struggling, if humans have to overcome obstacles, they can be overcoming obstacles that have a technical thing to them.
Like a line like, whatever it is, contact in 12 seconds. That resonates.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, totally.
You must go before she finds the weapon is missing.
I'm not leaving without my men.
They're not your men anymore. They belong to Sylvia. I can no longer control them. Or her.
And it's like, what's the thing you're carrying around? Why is it not help you to do anything?
Yeah, that thing is pretty powerful. How can it not can't you just get rid of Sylvia?
Yeah. Or fight her in some way. But he's like, nope, I can't. I'm sorry. There's one of my favorite Simpsons lines where Homer says, I've tried nothing and I'm all out of ideas.
She's a great danger. And it was not necessary. We could have entered your galaxy in peace.
And my note here was, seriously, what was the plan? What were you trying to do?
Yeah, why were you here?
Yeah, well, it's like if you wanted to come in peace, why did you kill Jackson and try to scare the Enterprise away? Why didn't you just go, hi?
Yeah, we come in peace. Yeah, literally. Like,
we got this cool transmuter thing and we're little creatures, but we'd love to hang out and we could learn from each other. Be great.
That would have been a completely different episode.
It's a very short episode, but very satisfying.
We hear a giant cat screeching, and we see a giant shadow of a little cat on a wall.
Yeah, it's even as a kid, I was like, "That's a shadow."
It's a little cheesy.
Yeah. One of the techniques you use, by the way, I don't know if you'll notice that the cat moves in slow motion.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is anytime you do scale, and you want something little to look big, and it moves, you have to slow it down. And the reason is because gravity, there's certain things that move at a consistent speed. So if I have a model of the Empire State Building and I drop something off the model of the Empire State Building, it will take 2 seconds to get to the ground. And so even if I film it like it's the real thing, things fall too fast. And so you put them into slow motion so that the slow motion matches the scale.
The scale.
Exactly. So the cat, that's why, and you'll see it in one of the places that's really noticeable, by the way, anytime you have models of ships in water, because they slow down the ships so that they look bigger, but the droplets of water are too big because droplets of water are a specific size. So that cat, the reason it never looks right is you can see it's in slow motion. And the slow motion is what kills the effect of making it look big.
Yeah.
And that is the end of Act 3. We're back in Act 4. We start with the incredibly terrifying giant cat shadow.
Fascinating.
Why a cat?
Racial memories. The cat is the most ruthless, most terrifying of animals. As far back as the saber-toothed tiger.
Now, we talked, I think we were off mic, that when a cat really hisses at you, it is genuinely scary.
Yeah.
But I don't think the cat is the most terrifying of animals.
But a cat hissing.
That is scary.
Is scary.
Definitely true.
I think I can stop her.
You better let us.
Pulls out a phaser. It's out of energy. Which again, like, well, why do we even have it? Like, what was the point of getting it just to pull it out and have it be drained?
She must have drained it. We could have jumped Scott and Sulu at any time. We didn't know.
And they discover they're trapped. There's no way out. And the cat is coming down the hall, a tiny hallway in slow motion. They go back to the same dungeon. They close the door. And Spock now looks up at the hole that they fell through earlier and goes, oh, maybe we can get out this way. Says, ready when you are, Captain. And Kirk lifts him up and Spock jumps out. It's pretty spry. And Korob goes to the closed door.
Why?
Exactly.
Why does he go to the closed door? Why doesn't he stand by Kirk and wait for his turn to go up to the next level?
Why doesn't he use the transmuter that's in his hand?
Yeah.
Why doesn't he do anything?
Yeah. Why doesn't he use the transmuter to maybe turn himself into a giant cat and take on Sylvia, the giant cat?
Yeah.
I don't know. You're right. Yeah. Lots of questions. And this is just bad writing.
Yeah. But he goes and he just stands at the door while Spock gets up to the next floor. And then we see, I do like the shot of the cat through the window in the tiny door. I like that. I think that works really well. And we hear that door won't last. And of course it doesn't. And he was just standing next to the door, gets crushed by the door. Kirk goes back, tries to help him, realizes he's dead, starts to leave, and then he grabs the transmuter as the cat is hissing at him through the door. And I love Spock, who says,
Captain, a bit more alacrity, if you please.
Which is a great Spock line. I also love, it just looks cool when Kirk tosses the transmuter up and Spock catches it. It's a nice little bit of physicality. Kirk gets up there, and McCoy immediately attacks with a mace. It's a terrible stunt, man. It just looks nothing like McCoy. And Kirk knocks McCoy out.
Oh, by the way, this is the source of one of the great bloopers on that blooper reel that I've discussed before. So this the scene when McCoy goes to attack Kirk with that club that he's holding. Yeah. So you see Kirk knock the club out of McCoy's hand, and then he knocks him out.
Right.
So in the blooper, you see Shatner knock the club out of DeForest Kelly's hand. So he knocks the club out of his hand. The club bounces off the wall and back into DeForest Kelly's hand.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's hilarious.
DeForest Kelly, like you could see in a split second, he's like, should I pretend to drop it? But he holds on to it and he laughs and it kind of breaks up the scene.
By the way, I went on, because you mentioned it so many times and I hadn't watched it in forever, so I went on YouTube to look at that blooper reel. Man, the condition is just terrible.
Oh, it's awful.
And I really go like, okay, somebody today should be able to restore this. I mean, it's in really bad shape, but they should be able to restore it a little bit so that it's at least, you can barely watch it now.
You can barely see it.
Yeah,
it's
terrible.
It's so many generations removed.
Scotty is attacking Spock, who dodges and does a little FSNP on him. And then Sulu gets in a martial arts pose. And
I hate when he does that. It's such a stereotype.
It totally, what's so funny is as a kid, when I was 9, like when I saw Enter the Dragon at 9 years old, that might be the most life-changing movie of my life.
Wow.
Well, because, 25 years of taking martial arts classes after that.
Did you cover that on Cinephiles?
We did do it on Cinephiles.
Of course you did. Yeah.
We did it really early though. So like before it got to be this huge long show. But so anytime I saw anybody doing anything that looked remotely like martial arts, I really liked it. And looking at it now, I'm like, oh, they don't know what they're doing. It doesn't look right. And then as bad as the stuntman for McCoy is, the stuntman for Sulu is terrible.
Yeah, it's bad.
And it's really, but what I find, it's going to sound weird to say, I almost find it like, it's not racist, but Sulu goes down and kind of hits this door and then is awake and then just passes out.
Yeah, he knocks out. It's bad. It's poorly edited.
It's just really lame. And it makes Sulu look bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree.
It's just really, really lame. McCoy wakes up again, gets knocked out again, and then we hear again the screech of the cat, and the shadow cat is approaching.
Most unpleasant situation, Captain. If only your phaser had some power.
Maybe we do.
And he grabs the transmuter and he holds up the wand.
Sylvia, I have the transmuter. It's mine now.
And the cat backs up and disappears, and then we hear,
You're very clever, Captain. More so than I'd imagined.
And there is Sylvia.
Clever, resourceful, and handsome.
And is moving towards him, and Spock says,
Don't let her touch the wand, Captain.
And it's like, really? Thanks, Spock. I think we figured that part out. Except that she's done everything with the necklace.
Yeah.
She's zombified people with the necklace. She's done all this powerful stuff with the necklace. Why can't she do that right now?
I wasn't sure before, but I am now. This is the source of your power, isn't it? The transmuter.
No, not the source. It's merely an amplifier, a director. The mind is the source. Mine is simple, but yours has the key, but you don't know how to use it.
So I think so first of all, it's very much like Trelane.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like Trelane.
The second thing is she's saying that your mind would be the key to using the transmuter, but you don't know how to use the transmuter. Is that what she's saying?
I think so.
I think so too.
Come with me. I will teach you. You will teach me.
Why? Because your people have nothing of your own? Is that why you need us?
We need your dreams, your ambition. With them I can build. Give me the transmuter.
No.
They're like parasites in some ways.
Well, but this is what doesn't make sense, because she says we need your dreams, your ambition. That line does sound like they're parasites. But then why did Kobar say we could have come in peacefully? And why did they try to scare them away? And what was the test that they passed? And why did they have to pass the test? And why did she not use Sulu and McCoy for their dreams? And it's all doesn't make sense.
Yeah, why Kirk? Why wouldn't one of those people suffice?
Well, if the mission had become because the way Kirk says it is your people have nothing of your own. It implies that their mission had something to do with being a parasite. But then why? But that's Sylvia is doing something totally different from what Kobar's, because she says you're a puppet and he says you're betraying the old ones.
Korob.
I'm never gonna. We're almost done with the episode. It's just not gonna sit in my brain. Do you ever have things where like you have a mind like a steel trap for like a whole bunch of information? I am assuming there are other things that you cannot keep in there.
Oh yeah, there are for sure.
Yeah.
I can't remember people's names when I first meet them.
I'm terrible at that. Terrible.
Yeah.
And
I'm always like, what's your name again? Sorry.
I mean, there are people that I've met several times that I have to pretend that I can remember what their name is.
Yeah.
But if you ask me like something that James Buchanan did in 1858, I might be able to pull that out. But names, no, I can't do it. Anyway, it's a bit of a digression.
Don't you know what you're giving up? Everything that your species finds desirable. Look at me. I'm a woman. I am all women.
And then he like pushes her away.
And she kneels in front of him. It's really weird.
Yeah, it's weird. And he pushes her away and she like falls. And he says, I don't know what you are, but you're not a woman.
There's a weird sexist thing about this of saying like,
yeah, I agree.
It's sort of the women are these warm, compassionate creatures and you're clearly not that. So you can't be a woman. Is like, well, he's saying something nice, but it's also sort of reductive. Mm-hmm. And she pulls out a phaser.
Korob was wrong. I didn't destroy all your weapons.
Which Korob never said that she destroyed their weapons.
I guess. Yeah, he didn't, did he?
No. He said, "Here, I'm giving you some of your weapons back."
Yeah, but
he didn't say she destroyed the others.
But it was. I guess they just. Well, wait. No, Kirk says, that there's no power in the phasers. We could have jumped Scott and Sulu at any time.
But Korob never said anything about Sylvia destroyed your weapons.
Right.
Which maybe was from an earlier draft or who knows. And she says, give me the transmuter. Give it to me. And he starts to offer it because Kirk's got
love this, by the way. I love this moment. He starts like he's going to give it to her, and then he smashes it on the table. There's like a flash, and then Kirk is on the surface of Pirate 7.
Yep.
With his phaser in his hand.
Yep.
And Spock and Scotty and Sulu and McCoy come over to him.
Yep.
Everything is gone.
Yep.
So that's at this moment is when we hear Scotty say his one and only spoken line in the episode, which is everything's vanished. Sulu, we see him throughout the episode, but he never says a word. It's the only time that George Takei didn't have any dialogue.
Oh, wow.
During the original show. But then this is when we see Korob and Sylvia as who they really are. And in the original version of this episode, you can see the strings that they're marionettes, and it looks so fake. And
I actually like the design of these creatures.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, but
I just like that it's not just like an alien of the week with a weird forehead and a weird nose. But the marionette, the strings, when they did the remastered version with the revised special effects, they actually were able to take out the strings.
Good.
So it looks a whole lot better.
Korob and Sylvia, as they really are. Their forms were an illusion.
An illusion. So does that mean that the castle was never really there? Does that mean that these life forms, these ornithoid life forms, were they like the Telosians? in the cage that they had power of illusion. Now, in the cage, the Telosians, their power of illusion was organic, but or was it organic?
I don't think we know.
We actually don't know where the source of the power of illusion came from on Talos 4, but we do know that the source of the power of illusion from these ornithoid life forms came from this transmuter. So was there ever actually a physical sustenance to the castle and everything inside the castle, or was it all really an illusion? Like, that's what I don't think we really know.
I don't think. Well, and I don't think they knew, because isn't there a line where Spock says, "Well, this is all real"? Like, clearly, like somewhere where they're in the dungeon or with the manacles or something like that. I feel like there's a moment where they say, like, this. Well, and the thing, like, well, what do we? Yeah, I don't think they know. I don't think it's consistent. Well, because we also go to, like, if we're in the holodeck and I pick something up, that thing I pick up is real because it was created through transporter, replicator sort of technology. That's the idea. If I'm in an illusion and I pick something up and feel it, well, are you in the cage? I'm just in a cage. Nothing is actually happening. Whereas it could be that because they talk about, Korob says we can move and create matter and alter things, molecular structure. So clearly it's not all an illusion, But what I really think is they said it was an illusion when it was convenient for the writers to say an illusion, and they said other things when it was convenient to say other things.
Fascinating. A life form totally alien to our galaxy. If we could preserve and study this.
Too late.
Yep, they're gone.
They're gone. They're dead.
Yep.
They're now smoking and disintegrating and burning up.
All of this, just an illusion. No illusion. Jackson is dead. Kirk to Enterprise, come in.
Standing by, Captain.
5 to beam up.
And no joke. We don't get a joke at the end.
Yeah, we don't get a joke.
And that is the end of Catspaw.
So what did some of our cast members have to say about Catspaw? Well, Dorothy Fontana, who was the story editor at the time, said that was planned all along to be a Halloween show. When Robert Bloch pitched it, we said, that's got to be the Halloween show for sure. I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. William Shatner said, unfortunately, due to the usual budgetary constraints, we couldn't afford the necessary optical effects that would have made the giant cat seem more realistic and scary. And the heavy black strings used to guide the puppets of alien Sylvia and Korob are definitely noticeable. Antoinette Bauer, who played Sylvia, said, we spent a lot of time trying to seduce the real cat into coming through the tunnel. And it was a lot of fun, mainly because of the lovely cast, who obviously had no idea that Star Trek would become the huge cult thing that it still is.
I could tell you sort of my final I think you know what? I don't have much to say. Scott, when we started this, you said, I hope that maybe some of my epiphanies can make you like this episode a little more.
Did they?
The Chekhov one.
The Chekhov
That is
one.
the one. That is 100% awesome and totally makes this an important, critical episode in Star Trek canon.
Otherwise...
But I fear that maybe it went a little bit the other way. I might have taken away a little bit of this episode. I think it's weak, and I think it gets weaker the more I think about it. It's not because of the actors. I think they're all good. It's not because of the production design. I think it's all good. I think that we want to make a Halloween episode, and maybe there were a bunch of different writers, but it just doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Well, you know what? I think the fact that this episode does tie into some of the episodes that we've seen when it comes to absolute power corrupting.
Yeah.
The other epiphany that I had about how similar this episode is to the Squire of Gothos, which is a superior episode.
Agreed, 100%.
It is absolute. Squire Gothos is a much better episode. But just the revelation that I had about those similarities made me discover something new about this episode, Catspaw, that I never really realized before. But I agree with you. There are a lot of holes, a lot of things that are questionable about plot points in this teleplay, but I still think it's a fun episode. I still think because it is the only episode done to order for a holiday, it makes it fun. Like I said, the cinematography from Jerry Finnerman is breathtaking. The score by Gerald Fried is absolutely one of the best and was reused many times in other episodes. I think the cast looks great because they were all in great form after having some summertime. And it was the first episode filmed for season 2. And this is an episode that I think it's fun because I think the less I really think about it, even though we overthink things on Enterprise incidents, but as much as I agree with your points of contention, it is still an episode that I choose to enjoy just for the face value of it all. And the only thing that makes me like it more is the epiphany with Trelane, and also, of course, the revelation I had about the Stardate with Chekhov.
Well, so we would love to hear how you feel about Catspaw. Is it one of your favorites? Have I ruined it for you? Is it one of the parts of it that you like the most? And please, if anybody can tell us what they're actually trying to accomplish, I would like to know. Best place to contact us is on our Facebook page. Do a search for Enterprise Incidents, but also we're on Twitter under Enter Incidents, on Instagram at Enterprise Incidents. Please subscribe to the show if you haven't already on Apple Podcasts. If you're not an Apple person, do it on YouTube. If you don't like YouTube, you can go to Spotify. If you don't like Spotify, you can go to Stitcher. And if you don't like any of those, there's probably 900 other podcast servers where you can find Enterprise Incidents. But even if you don't like any of them, please go back to Apple Podcasts and leave a review if you can, because they really do help the show. And you can follow me at SR Morris on Twitter, at SR Morris1 on Instagram. And if you like stories with castles and magic and things like that, well, you can listen to the Cinephiles episode on The Princess Bride or Excalibur or Beauty and the Beast, or one of my favorite episodes with one of my favorite guests we've ever had on the Cinephiles. You can listen to our episode on the adventures of Robin Hood with Errol Flynn and our special guest, Joe Mantegna.
What about if you're talking about like ghosts and haunted houses? Didn't you on the Cinephiles do a deep dive on The Shining?
We did. It's funny. It was on my list here, but then I was kind of feeling I've already listed too many. Maybe I listed too many, but yes, we did it great. One of my favorite episodes is on The Shining. That's another one you could check out.
Well, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at MovieMan. So please be sure to share Enterprise Incidents with fellow Star Trek fans, whether they are deep divers or casual fans, whether they are diehards of the original series, or maybe they just need a refresher course on what makes the original series the greatest Star Trek series of them all. But please do spread the love by sharing Enterprise Incidents. We are grateful for your support. We are grateful for your feedback, your reviews, for the engagement that we've been having with you on social media. And thank you so much for your support. And up next on Enterprise Incidents, we are doing the deep dive on my single favorite, and I mean favorite, episode of Star Trek of them all. It is Metamorphosis. That is next on Enterprise Incidents. And until then, keep going boldly.